First thing I want to do is mark on 3 and 4 centimeters from one edge of each waistband, making sure that the marks are mirrored. 3 centimeters is the inlay I put onto the trouser, and the extra 1 centimeter is the seam allowance. Next, chalk the waistline onto the trouser, allowing it to curve with the top of the inlay. Same for the rise inlay too. If you've forgotten or lost your mark stitches, I put 3 centimeters at the top. From the 4 centimeter point on your waistband, measure half the waist measurement and mark that on as well. We mark that point so that we know where both ends of the trouser are going to be on the waistband. I also want to check the length of the waistline on the trouser. From the inlay mark, we should get a measurement of about half the waist plus 1 centimeter for the seam allowance and 2.5 centimeters of ease. The same amount extra that we had when we drafted the pattern and checked the waist measurement the first time. On the bearer side, mark the waistline and the inlay, and on the bearer, we should mark it as a slightly downward incline, so that the waistband doesn't show over the front. We should cut the cilicia down to 1 centimeter below the waistline here. We should cut the stitching holding the cilicia so that it can sit 1 centimeter below the waistline. Mark 7 millimeters into the trouser from where the fabric is attached to the zip, because this is where we'll overlap the fly side onto. Again, measure the waistline from there to the inlay for the same basic check. Line up the 3 centimeter mark on the waistband to the inlay on the inlay mark we chalked on the lining, while the bias canvas edge of the waistband lined up to the mark stitches. Start basting it down near the heavy canvas but on the bias tape. As stated, the waistband on the trouser being a little more than we want, we will ease in the extra fabric as we baste it to the waistband, where we marked the correct/finished waist measurement. It does depend on the amount you can physically put in, and you might need to reduce the starter size of the trouser depending on the material. To ease in the fabric, we need to pull the waistband, causing a small amount of rumpling in the trouser. This way we can line the front mark on the trouser up to the second mark on the waistband. The end result will be that the trouser has the waist measurement. Now, it didn't take me half a minute to understand what that whole bit was, so give it a bit of thought. As you do it more and more, it will become clearer. It definitely took me a few pairs of trousers and a couple of jackets as well before I understood what was going on. You might like to use a pin at our endpoint so that we know how much ease there is to put in. Importantly, be sure to move the top of the back pocket out of the way. For the front pocket, you'll baste through the blind, but none of the cilicia. Make sure the seam allowances and the darts are basted down as they're supposed to sit, and baste securely so that they won't be moved by the machine. We want to put most of the extra fabric into the back and side, because that's where most people need the extra fabric, being more flat around the front. Do similar on the fly side, with the same but mirrored points marked on the waistband. Line up the first to the inlay, and then the waist measurement plus 1 centimeter to the very front edge. We are basting through the fly as well. To reiterate, on the fly guard you need to unpick the cilicia to below the waistline. You need half the zip out of the way, and you definitely need at least 1 centimeter of waistband left past the guard, which is why we added all 16 centimeters of inlay to the waistband. That said, if it does come up short, so long as the other end goes past the seam allowance on the back, it will be okay to reduce the amount of inlay we have. Baste it a second time if there's a lot of ease, so that it's better distributed. It'll be easier to iron in and less likely to create pleats and kinks. To the same effect, wet steam and press the fabric to try and shrink the fabric to make it easier to sew in general. We're sewing along the point that the bias tape meets the canvas, which is the same as a 1 cm seam allowance. And for best results, don't catch the heavy canvas at all. When machining them, you still don't want to catch any silicia, hence it has to be done in 2 parts. With the bearer side, we might want to start from the center back, while the fly side, we might want to start from the center front. We want to machine along the back onto the blind and stopping where the blind meets the front part. Backtack and flip the pocket towards the back, starting exactly next to where you finished, making sure the seam allowance there is open, backtacking again and continuing to the zip and or center front, or vice versa kind of. When sewing the right trouser, should your zip teeth go up above the waistline, slow down and maybe use the wheel to move the needle when going over the teeth. Otherwise, you may very well slam a needle into a solid metal nugget, and that doesn't tend to go well. Proceed all the way across the bearer, folding out the seam allowance to sew slightly onto it and don't backtack. On the left trouser, sewing over the fly, still no need to backtack. Check the trousers, make sure nothing is nipped anywhere, accidentally put in any tiny accidental pleats. Something I think the Italians do because it traps significantly more ease, giving them greater comfort on the whole. But come on man, let's try and keep it clean. If you did get a small pleat, take out the small amount of stitching either side and try to shrink the fabric with steam and our iron before replacing the stitching. Press the seam and take out the basting. We need to split the side seam down to the waist stitch because the front trousers inlay is going to be ironed up with the front pocket and the back inlay will just be ironed down. And definitely split the stitch down to the waistline, not the fabric. Press the seam on the back trouser open and iron the front trousers inlay upwards. If you wanted a fob pocket for your Oyster card or some such, as shown in the waistband video, then yes, we do need to cut down the appropriate width of inlay in order to sew it on. To put on the side adjusters, establish where you want them. Usually the center of the buckle is in line with the side seam of the trouser, and then decide how high you want it. We can trim away any loose threads if needs be. Baste them in place. It don't need to be pretty, with the long adjuster pointing backwards, and about halfway through the buckle as standard. Basically, do both tabs in the same way, but making sure that the tab that holds the buckle in place, the thin part, is secured under the arrow part. Basically, do both halves of the tab in the same way, but making sure that the tab that holds the buckle in place, the thin part, is secured under the arrow part. Once set, I'm chalking a line to follow with a prick stitch across so that I know on both sides where I want to stop felling. Unlatch the long adjuster from the buckle so that you can get at it. Set the adjusters in place as you please, either fell or prick stitch them in place, or both. Make sure that it's safe and strong at the point that both sides stop being attached to the waistband, as those might be under the most amount of stress. Alternatively to prick stitching normally across the tabs, we can stitch from the back, the waistband side. Maybe more of a running stitch, we can stitch such that we catch the bottom of the non-showing half of the tabs. This way, we don't have a line of pricks along the tab. I don't know, just thought I'd put that out there. Really, it doesn't take me that long anymore, and enough practice and techniques won't take more than 20 minutes to do all 4 of them. We can just remove the basting when we're done.